Well, good morning. So this week we are, as James just said, we are launching our brand new series, Summer Refresh, which means all kinds of fun things as we move into, I won't say towards the end of summer, but towards the second half of summer, right? We'll continue in summer mode. So like in the coffee shop, there's summer refresh themed drinks. You can see them there, they look like our graphic, which is really, really beautiful. Lots and lots of fun things around this because we have something of a tradition here at Countryside where we intentionally take a part of the summer and we say we recognize the rhythms of our year and that sometimes the summer is the very, very best opportunity for us to spend some time thinking about the way we live for the rest of the year. So the last couple of summers, we've walked through Summer Mixtape, Volume 1 and Volume 2, listening to the Psalms and listening to what God has to say about the mixtape of our lives, paying attention to the soundtrack and the things that are on repeat in our lives and saying, so what kind of mixtape should we actually have? So that was the last couple of summers. This series is also about rhythm. It's Summer Refresh. We can't always be in growth mode, like the above the surface growth, kind of like visible growth. We need to do the work under the surface sometimes as well. And so we talk about a growth rhythm, this rhythm of this is the visible things and this is the foundational things. So each week throughout this series is going to be an opportunity to refresh some area of our lives. We're going to use the book of Proverbs as the framework and the way, the foundation and the structure for this series, but looking and saying, we might be operating in a certain way. And it is time for some kind of refresh in that way where we live and approach that kind of situation differently. And so it makes sense for us as we start this series to launch this new series by taking on one of the big challenges of life. And it's a challenge, as we've been talking through this series as a team, it's a challenge that's actually woven through almost the entirety of this series. Every message we're gonna have has pieces of this challenge at play in it, is that we want the ending without the beginning. You could say it maybe this way, we want the outcome without starting where that outcome actually comes from. We want the outcome without starting where that outcome actually comes from. Proverbs is a book about wisdom, but this isn't just a wisdom problem, right? This is true of so many areas of our lives, like fitness. We want the outcome of fitness without walking through the whole process that it takes to get to fitness, right? We want financial health and financial security without the process and the decisions and the foundation that it takes to get to that kind of experience financially. We want healthy relationships without doing the work that leads to healthy relationships. And so we might be tempted, as we talk about Proverbs, we might be tempted to look for guidance in Proverbs for specific choices. Like, okay, if it's a book of wisdom and it's a book that shows choices, then this specific decision, what do I do with this decision? It's probably not unique to our approach to Proverbs. Actually, it probably is very consistent with our approach to our relationship with God. Like we might ask God for guidance, or if we ask God for guidance, we generally ask God for specific decisions, right? Help me understand this one thing. We don't back out and say, God, help me overall approach life in a different kind of way. God, would you give me a foundation for wisdom, for decision-making that moves through all kinds of circumstances? We tend to say, I have this problem. God, would you help me solve this problem? And then I'll figure it out from there and figure out the other pieces along the way. But when it comes to wisdom, the beginning really matters. The source matters. And the problem is, for many of us, we have ourselves as our source of wisdom, ourselves as our source of the framework for the way we make decisions, the foundation for where our choices come from. Somebody's saying, that's not me. No. You're thinking of somebody, though. You know somebody who does this. And there are so many problems. There are so many problems with having ourselves as our source of wisdom. If you don't believe that, the outcome actually proves the problem. Self as the source of wisdom leads to two things. One, selfish or self-centered choices. Right? Selfish or self-centered choices. When we operate with ourselves as the foundation for our decision making, then we only make decisions that are rooted in what ourselves want. And then two, choices made without a broader perspective. Choices made without perspective. We lose our sense of scale as we make the decisions that are in front of us. Without the foundation, we can convince ourselves of just about anything. That's true of us, and it's true even of our heroes. If we were going to make a list, we just kind of like start shouting out names of our favorite Bible characters, the heroes that we know through Scripture, those Bible characters that we look at their lives and we're like, that person is a hero. Actually, if we would do that, let's say like top 5, I bet you David would be in most of our top 5s. Actually, that's true from the time that David walked this earth. He would have been in the top 5 for people as they talked about their heroes of the faith. David was described as a man after God's heart. But David didn't always get it right. David started his life as a shepherd, actually a really good shepherd, a shepherd that people actually talked about how good of a shepherd he was. And then over the course of his life, in ways that only God could have orchestrated, David faced off with a giant by the name of Goliath and won that battle on behalf of his army. And then David eventually, and through we're talking like skipping a lot of his story, eventually became king. Shepherd to king in a way that only God could have woven together this kind of story. But one day, David, this man after God's heart, was in his palace, King David, now not Shepherd David, King David. He's in his palace and he's on the roof of his palace and he looks out onto the city around his palace. And he looks and he sees his neighbor's property. And as he's looking at his neighbor's property, he sees his neighbor's wife. So David, as he sees his neighbor's wife, all of a sudden is faced with a problem he didn't expect to be faced with. All of a sudden now, he desires his neighbor's wife. And so he begins to think of ways to solve this particular problem. How do I make a choice in this? I'm now faced with a problem. I'm now faced with this situation. What do I do with what I'm now desiring? And so David gathers his servants and he sends his servants to his neighbor's house to talk to his neighbor's wife. And he sends his servants to invite his neighbor's wife to a Coldplay concert. Oh, no, come on. Basically. I had this story in my notes before all of that. Like, so if you don't know what I'm laughing about, like, bless your news feed. Goodness. But David makes a choice. And then he continues to make choices to cover up the choice that he's made. And eventually, Nathan, the prophet who was sent by God, who has a really, really strong, good name, goes and he approaches David and confronts him for this decision. Not just the decision that he's made, but all the decisions that he did to double down on this choice, to cover up the mistake that he's made. And as he confronts him, he tells the story of this neighbor who had wealth, who had a neighbor who didn't have much but had a sheep, and then this neighbor actually, hosting company, took the sheep from his neighbor. And David, the shepherd, gets frustrated. It's like, that is wrong. You don't take somebody else's sheep. Shepherd has become a stealer of the sheep next door. And so Nathan points at him and says, that's who you are, David. And David doesn't argue. As Nathan describes what the results of his choices, the consequences of his decision. He doesn't argue with Nathan. David receives the correction. And as he's listening, as he's hearing this, he doesn't try and negotiate the terms of the consequences. He doesn't try and justify himself in what he's done. He makes a simple response. Listen in 2 Samuel 12, verse 13. David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Period. I have sinned against the Lord. No argument, no attempt to justify his choices, no negotiating the consequences. And that simple response reveals something that's very significant for us. It's significant for the years and years, centuries ago when David was facing this. It's significant for us as we deal with the decisions in our lives. There is a wise approach to dealing with the unwise choices in our lives. There is a wise approach to dealing with the unwise choices in our lives, and it's run back to God. And so David says, after having been confronted with the decision that I've made, the correction from God, I'm simply going to own my mistake. I'm going to trust God as I run back to him. If we're only worried about the result of our choices, then we don't know what to do when our choices lead us to results that we don't want. We end up finding ourselves trying to somehow salvage the outcome, right? If we can at least manage the perceptions of the decisions that we've made, and we're settling for less and less and less in terms of an outcome because we're getting the results that we don't want. But if we pay attention to how and why we make the choices we make, like where do our choices actually come from, then we can figure out the way forward, even when we get it wrong. And so this morning, it might be time to refresh how you make your choices, right? Not just the choices that you make, but it might be time to refresh how you make your choices. Because it's not just that you made the choice, right? We see decisions being made all the time. David made a decision about his neighbor's wife, and he made that decision. It's not even just an issue of the choice that he made. It's why did he make that choice? What was it in him? And what was it that was at the foundation of his decision-making in that moment that led him to make those decisions? It's the why and the how that you make that choice. And so Proverbs helps us with this. Proverbs seems to open with the kind of urgency that we see in a letter that Paul would have written to the church. Because it's literally, as you look at the beginning, these first 7 verses of Proverbs, it's literally a title, right? Proverbs, that leads right into the content. It's like it's a sentence. It's written in a really unique way where the title of the book literally merges right into, becomes the first sentence of the book itself. It leads right into the content. And unlike any other book that's in the Bible, it opens with this run-on sentence that is a crystal clear and robust purpose statement. It actually says this is why this book exists, and these are the things that we hope you get from this book. And so this first section, one long sentence that then is followed by the foundational motto of wisdom. Here we go. Proverbs 1, starting at verse 1, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David. Right? This is why we talked about David just a few moments ago. King of Israel. To know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing and righteousness, justice and equity, to give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. So why Solomon? Actually, as we work through the book of Proverbs, we're going to see that at various moments along the way in this book, other authors are mentioned along with Solomon as the book of Proverbs is laid out. Several authors are listed among the book, but Proverbs seems to point consistently to a Solomon-like approach to life, a wise approach to life. 1 Kings chapter 3 tells the story at the very beginning of Solomon's reign as king. And in a dream, God comes to Solomon and offers Solomon, ask something of me. And he's having this conversation with God, and then God says, ask what I shall give you. And here's Solomon's response. This is helpful for us because it helps us make sense of the purposes of the book of Proverbs. Here's this young king. Solomon says, you have shown great and steadfast love to your servant David, my father, because he walked before you in faithfulness, in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart toward you. You have kept for him this great and steadfast love and have given him a son to sit on his throne this day. And now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of David, my father. Although I'm but a little child, I do not know how to go out or to come in. And your servant is in the midst of your people whom you have chosen, a great people, too many to be numbered or counted for multitude. And here's the ask, verse 9. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to govern this, your great people? Solomon asks God for wisdom so that he can lead his people faithfully. And Solomon makes a request of God. It's the kind of request of God that God longs to help us with. He says, God, would you help me make good and godly decisions as I lead your people? And God is pleased with this. And God says, I'll give you that. I'll give you a whole lot more, but I will give you wisdom beyond what you could possibly have even been imagining as you asked that question. And so this request actually makes these four purposes that we see at the beginning of Proverbs make sense. It says to know, wisdom, and instruction. Instruction isn't just knowledge, like useful facts along the way. This is knowledge applied to life. Like this is family wisdom, things that parents would talk to their kids about to say, look, when you approach this, it's not just that you know this information, you now know how to solve this problem because this is instruction in life, handed down across generations. It says to know wisdom and instruction. 2, to understand words of insight. This one overlaps with some of the others because in many ways the nuance and the distinction in this list in some ways is lost in time and in translation, but in essence, to be able to make sense of wise words. We know when we have conversations with people who are wise, people who are godly, who make good and godly decisions, that when we spend time around them, that the more time we spend with them and we hear the words that they speak, actually those words start to make more and more sense. We actually take hold of them in different kinds of ways when we're spending our time in them. Purpose 3, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, justice, and equity. Receive is an active word. It's not just like this has been given to you, but it's to take in. To take in this instruction that's being taught. Because it's not just that you receive as in you have been given, you receive as in you've been given, and you take hold of. Right? It's an active move on the part of the one who's receiving this instruction. And then these 3 categories that are traditional with sages and prophets. 3 words that in some circles here and now, there's some like baggage around some of these words. We've twisted them up in so many kinds of ways, but the wise and the sages have always been interested in living rightly, relationally, and having a social expression of right living. We've twisted them up in so many ways, but for the sages, the question is, are you living right? In those places where you have influence, is it just and is it fair? Right relationships and a right approach to social living. To give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. Prudence is cleverness. Isn't it interesting how something that is foolish can seem so clever? It can be packaged in such a way where it's like, that just seems so right. It's so clever. At the core of it, it's foolishness, but it's expressed with cleverness. It's offered to us in clever kinds of ways that make us think that we should actually take hold of that thing. Foolishness can be presented in all kinds of clever ways that make it sound good. And so in Proverbs it says, and wisdom can be presented in clever ways too. Wisdom is clever if we embrace it. It's like wisdom and chasing after the right kind of wisdom actually leads us almost like we have a superpower in dealing with foolishness. We can see through the cleverness of the presentation and see the foolishness at its core. It gives us a superpower to deal with the nonsense of the world, to go from simple or young, where we're easy prey for foolishness, to wise and ready to take it on. Even when words get twisted to mean different kinds of things, but not just now. Not just that we have just to know, but we actually let it shape our lives. And so this long opening sentence gives way to this new kind of use of words. It's a different tense. It says, so let the wise. It's been describing purpose, but now it's an active sort of statement. So let the wise hear and increase in learning. And the one who understands obtain guidance. To understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and their riddles. That it's important as we look at these moves, right? There's these 3 moves that are revealed in this opening stanza of the book of Proverbs. But it's important to note that all of these moves are not to achieve something. It's growing out of something. And it's wisdom. So on the foundation of wisdom, then we make these moves. To hear. And we think hear, and we're like to perceive, right? To like, there's like a sound that we perceive, and we hear this. The word that would have been written in this book as the writer of Proverbs is putting pen to paper. It's not just like perceive that there was a sound being made. This is active listening. This is hear and be ready to obey, right? To take it in, to hear, to perceive, to take in these words, but then with a readiness. It's this one move. It's hear and obey. Right? It's a different way of understanding it than the way we would typically think of when we think of hear. He says, and increase in learning. So not just wise as an achievement, like we'd hang a plaque on our wall that says, I have achieved wisdom, but wise as a journey. Saying there's a foundation for wise decisions. There's a foundation for making our decisions. And so we move through life and we learn along the way. We're shaped and formed along the way, that it's not just that we are wise, but that we are living this journey of wisdom. And move 3, obtain guidance. To be truly wise is to be open to guidance and correction. Right, this is David when he receives correction from God, and he said, I received this. I recognize that I have gotten it wrong. I have doubled down and tripled down on the decision that I made, and I will receive guidance and I will receive correction. Because obtaining guidance, being truly wise, open to guidance and correction, avoids the worst and most dangerous kind of, and we'll put quote marks around it, wisdom. Wise in our own eyes. So, as this book of Proverbs opens for us, as we start this 7-week journey and listening to what God has to say to us, as we approach our lives with wisdom, the purpose is growing in wisdom. The picture is growing in wisdom. Then the question becomes, then where does wisdom actually begin? Like where does this actually start? If all of this is growth, it's like the expression of what's the under the surface thing? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Now that we know the picture, now that we understand the purpose, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. This, by the way, is the motto of the sages, right? The wise people across time who understand that there is a source to wisdom. It's the beginning. And it's not just that it's the beginning and then we take from there and we move forward with whatever the decisions we make. Like, well, look, I have achieved or I have received wisdom, and that means every decision that I make from this point forward is because I'm a wise person. It's the beginning, but it's also the essence of wisdom, right? To know God. Gives us a framework, it's a foundation and a framework. So it's not just that we pray for wisdom or that we pray to make wise choices. We say, I want to be so rooted in God that I'm rooted in his wisdom. So it's not just I want to receive wisdom once and for all, but I want to be rooted in God as the source of wisdom. Whatever choices I may face, choices that we can't even fathom having to make in the future, we say, I want to do this, I want to move forward, rooted in him. Whatever choices may come along the way, whatever decisions we may be faced with in the future. One scholar said it this way: knowing God is the only thing that puts man into right relationship with the objects of his perception. Right? To know God is the only thing that puts man into a right relationship with the objects of his perception. The things that we see, it gives us a sense of scale and helps us perceive beyond what we can perceive from where we are. It's the antidote to our self as source of wisdom choices that have led to all sorts of regrets. And knowing God helps us live wisely. Even as we look around and there's all sorts of foolishness all around us, people chasing outcomes, trying to make a wise choice without the foundation that wise choices are made on. Maybe not actively despising like we might think of it, but certainly ignoring or failing to put to use. Like, we can know a lot. Like, we can have a lot of information and still be foolish. We can know a lot of things and still not be wise in how we approach life. And so at the foundation of this part of the conversation that leads into lots of conversations that are going to be happening over the next 7 weeks is this principle, that every choice we make comes from somewhere and leads us somewhere. Every choice we make comes from somewhere and leads us somewhere. Every choice we make is rooted in something. Every choice we make sets up future choices. Right? This is David doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on a poor decision that he's made, an unwise choice that he made. It leads to other choices that seem to get progressively less wise. Begins to limit our options and our decision making. Every choice we make comes from somewhere and leads us somewhere. So with that principle in view, so if that's true, which it is, then we need to make some commitments about how we live our lives differently. And there's 3 that I would suggest this morning that we take hold of. We say, if we're not already doing these things, if these commitments aren't already present in my life, I will take hold of this and make this a commitment. The first one is this: I will seek God first. I will seek God first. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And by the way, that's not just correction. Right? We could look at that and say that's corrective for us. It reveals to us that there's an issue at the source, at the foundation of our lives. But it's not just correction, it's actually a promise. Seek him first. And look what comes from that seeking him first. It's wisdom. Instead of chasing outcomes, we run to the source. So I will seek God first. Commitment 2, I will learn and grow as I walk with God. I will learn and grow as I walk with God. Can you imagine our lives if we just we're going to have 3 commitments, but these 2, I will seek God first. He will be at the foundation of my seeking of living a wise and godly life. I will seek God first, and I will learn and grow as I walk with God. Recognizing that seeking God and that wisdom is a journey. And so when I get it wrong, I'm going to remember the lesson from David. It says, I have sinned against the Lord. No justifying, no arguing, no negotiating with God about the consequences. Instead, learning from the choices that we made and growing, right? Taking a wise approach to dealing with the unwise choices of our lives. That even when we get it wrong, we can say, okay, there's a wise approach that says, what can I learn from the decision that I have just made? Right? It didn't go well. It wasn't the right decision. I know this. But is there wisdom in response to that? In the aftermath of our unwise choices, can we approach that with wisdom? We do that with our 3rd commitment. I will pay attention to both the fruit and the root of my choices. I will pay attention to both the fruit and the root of my choices. I'll pay attention to where my choices come from. I'll pay attention to where my choices take me. Right? Can you imagine our lives lived with these commitments in place? I will seek God first. I want to know his voice. I want to live my life on the foundation of his wisdom. And as I live my life, I don't want to just have I've received this from God and now I'm going to go live my life. I'm going to live my life in relationship with him, ongoing growth in wisdom. And when I make a choice, even if it doesn't lead to the outcome that I was hoping for, I will pay attention to the choices that I'm making. We pay attention to our choices with 2 simple questions. 1, what does this choice reveal about where my choices come from? Right? What does this choice reveal about where my choices come from? We might think of this in terms of, boy, I made the wrong choice, and now I need to pay attention to where that choice came from. It actually can be a celebration, too, of a journey that God is taking us on, of teaching us to operate in different kinds of ways, where we look and we say, I made a choice today that I never would have made a year ago. That choice, I've got to give God credit because he is guiding me and shaping me and forming me, that choice actually reveals something about my choices coming from a different place. Right? We hear this in our baptism testimonies. We hear this at table time around tables as we talk about the way we move forward with what God is teaching us. We live our lives differently because God is at work in and through our lives. It's also true when we make unwise choices. I got that wrong. What is it that's in me that has led me to get that kind of decision wrong? What does this choice say about what's at the root of the decisions that I make? Where do my choices come from? Where is the starting point for our decision making? What does this choice reveal about what's at the foundation of my life? Looking back, maybe we just take some past choices that we've made and some choices that are coming up along the way, and we say, what does this choice, what does my approach to this decision say about what's at the beginning of my life? And then question 2, what direction does this choice take me? Question 1 is about the root of our decisions. Question 2 is about the fruit. Right? What is it that grows out of this choice? And we're not talking even just about the immediate aftermath, not just the outcome of the choice. We pay attention to that, but we actually look and we say, how does this choice shape my life? Right? Like for David, he makes a decision about his neighbor's wife, and he's making this decision, and then it leads to other decisions now that he has to make. And those kinds of decisions are not the kind of decisions that a king has any business making in terms of the choices that are now presented to him. It's like, how in the world has it come to me having to choose between this and this? Well, it's because of the choice that you've already made that's now leading you to be faced with other choices that you would really, really, really prefer not to have to make. So it's not even that our choices, we need to pay attention. It's like, what choices flow out of the choices that we've already made? We're like, I just keep running into the same thing. I keep having to decide between this, and man, I can't believe I have to keep making this kind of decision. Well, what kind of decisions have you been making that lead you to having to make this kind of decision now? Right? What do my choices say about me? What direction does this choice take me? What kind of choices does this choice lead to next? So this morning, it might be time to refresh how you make your choices. Not just the choices that you make, but how you make your choices. Before we close, some of us may have been listening to this whole conversation. And we're sitting and we're looking at our lives and we're like, I have made decisions, and I am living in the aftermath and in the outcome of decisions. Like, no matter what I do, I can't seem to get it right. My life is full of regrets. There's a piece to this that when Proverbs was written could have only been dreamed about. God sent his son, Jesus, to make a way for us, so that his death could lead to forgiveness for us, so that his life could lead to new life for us. And so if you've been I'll just make an impassioned plea to you this morning. If you have been trying to make good decisions, and you've been trying to straighten out your life, but you've been doing it without Jesus at the foundation of your life, I beg you to ask him to forgive you and to let him lead your life from here forward, to put Christ at the foundation of your life. I promise you, you will never make better decisions. That this one choice, this refresh, the biggest refresh of your life,